Good morning and welcome to Martini's Eco Bites. Today I have a beautiful person that has been not only referred to me a number of times, but I have seen her posts that really inspired and touched my heart. A lady that has devoted so much love, time, and energy towards preservation of animals in the natural environment. And today I'm going to be interviewing and having a wonderful chat to Claire Smith from the Wildlife Rescue Sunshine Coast. She is the founder of this amazing organization and the director. And she's joining me today to talk about everything about habitat protection and coming back to logic when it comes to ecosystems and protection of the natural systems. Hi, Claire. How are you today?
Hey, Martine, I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me on the program.
My absolute pleasure. I know that we've talked very briefly about a few things. Sort of for me, I'm from the country, and so regional and rural areas have not been fully represented in having a voice. And people like yourself certainly don't get to have the platform for all the incredible dedicated work that you do. So please, if you'd like to introduce yourself, give a bit of a background about how you founded this lovely organization and just start sharing some of your wisdom about where we're going here with this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Martine. Where to begin? I mean, it's a lifelong passion, caring about our wildlife and our environment. I'm English,
Mm,
as you can tell from my accent. I've been here almost 25 years, and I grew up in rural England and was surrounded by animals and beautiful English countryside most of my adult life until I came here. I was lucky enough to be able to raise my children in the countryside and by the seaside. And the one consistency in my life has always been the protection of our beautiful environment, because
mm,
once you start seeing that being decimated, um, you have a decision to make. Do
mm,
you turn the other cheek and look away, or do you fight for it? And
yeah.
so I've been fighting in any way, shape, or form that I can think of to protect our wildlife, particularly, and our wild spaces, since I've lived here in Australia, which is 25 years. And, when I lived in the UK, I was always under the impression that, Australia was a leader in preserving its environment and caring about its iconic species that
Mm,
appear nowhere else in the world. We are
yeah.
so incredibly lucky here to be this a unique place. And it was a wake up call when I arrived here and found out that actually it wasn't the case. And that over the last 25 years, the scale of deforestation,
Mm,
if it isn't worrying and concerning people, it should be.
mm,
And very, very sadly, most of the deforestation is being carried out in Queensland, in the state that I live. And
yeah.
so to me, that is heartbreaking. Um, I have been caring for wildlife most of the time I've lived in Australia. I started Wildlife Rescue Sunshine Coast in around 2012. And we set up as the first 24-hour dedicated wildlife hotline and rescue service on the Sunshine Coast. Many have followed on since then and do provide after hours services, which is great.
Yeah.
I've reached the
And so needed.
conclusion, and and that's the problem. But
Mm,
I have reached the conclusion, and I'm not alone in this, that we can keep picking up orphaned, injured, and
mm,
sick wildlife, patching the ones up that can be mended and put out back out into where they came from. But really, it's a hiding to nowhere, because we're just banging our heads against a brick wall, because if those animals don't die the first time, the next time they will, because the rapidly shrinking wild areas on where we live in the Sunshine Coast is diminishing in front of our eyes. And
Yeah.
so what it's a band-aid. That is all wildlife rescue and rehabilitation is right now. It's a band-aid, because you know that everything that you put back out there is going to be under the same pressures, the same threats, and the same dangers. And it's it's heartbreaking. And you get to the point where you either have to walk away, because it's, and many really good carers have had to do that for their own mental health,
Yeah.
because y- it's, people like us do excuse me, do suffer with compassion fatigue and PTSD.
Mm, mm.
And at some points it breaks people, because there is no let up and there is no solution to the problem. So that's
I
kind
just,
of,
it breaks my heart to hear that, because the people that do this are so passionate and give so much and so selfless. The word is
yeah,
selfless, because they put the needs of these vulnerable animals above themselves. And to hear that this is still continuing in light of what we know already, Claire, is
yeah.
disturbing,
And that's
truly disturbing.
that's and that is the perfect word. It is disturbing. I mean, 90% of all deforestation in Queensland, even though it's supposed to go through the DA process, and it's supposed to be assessed
Yeah,
and monitored, 90% goes unchecked, unmonitored. And so therefore, that's why Queensland has this horrendous track record of being the state with the that clears the most land. And what that does alone is it puts us on the global deforestation frontline, which is a list of 24 global countries that are the worst offenders when it comes to deforestation. And Queensland is on that, sorry, Australia is on that list. And
mm,
it's because mainly of what we're doing in Queensland. And the really sad thing, if that isn't sad enough, is that we are the only Western country on that list. The rest are countries like Brazil, Peru. There are
developing
uh,
nations.
developed sub-Saharan Africa, um, places like Myanmar, Laos. A lot of those places, the people are very, very poor. They're taken advantage of by big developers that come, or land grabbers that come in from countries like the United States and buy up their land for little to nothing, flatten it, and turn it into feedlots for cattle.
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh.
we
Going,
are on that list.
that's part of me is embarrassed that we're
Mm,
on that list. Part of me is ashamed, and part of me is completely and utterly outraged, to be honest, Claire. We have talked about going back to a very grassroots, a very science-based ecological stance, at where habitat protection is about protection of biodiversity. And I have been banging this drum for a long time now, as the campaign coordinator for Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay, that without protection of habitat, we know we're going to absolutely, without question, have species loss. So, in this day and age, with development industry, everything that has been under the guise of, oh, it's the cost of progress. I'm so sick of that. I know that you
yeah.
would be too. That, oh, that's just the price we have to pay for progress. But what we don't understand is that more that we degrade pristine environments, the more that we're putting our own future at risk, and that there is no disconnection between the natural systems and us, that we are stewards and protectors of this planet, and we are failing so badly that we have allowed indoctrination and we have allowed ideology, politics. We've allowed those that hold the money strings to make the policies and legislation that now are overarching and from top down dictating legislation that goes against everything that I have seen that was working really well in this nation, which is possibly just before you immigrated here. So I grew up in the country and I saw some pretty good and some pretty bad practices, but I also saw a lot of people that were doing the right thing, that were listening to the way that people uh, in past times, Indigenous people, like
Yeah.
helped manage the land, through fire mitigation and all kinds of practices. And there were some really great things. I had the honor of actually meeting Malcolm Douglas. So Malcolm Douglas was also one of those grassroots out there bringing species that had never been seen before into the limelight, because there was that great connection between what's going on in arid, regional, and isolated communities and the city, because no one had ever seen these. But now we've got a total flip where there's an absolute disregard for habitat protection for the sake of saving the planet, that going in and destroying pristine oceans, reef systems, and completely interrupting the natural processes of those animals that is their habitat, is
Yes.
still under this overarching umbrella that this is what we need to save the planet. And you and I are on
Yeah.
the same page. It's like, if you're
It's
destroying habitat, then you are destroying the planet on a level that's faster than what you could even try and get a gauge of mitigating CO2. So if this is what it's under now, you and I have talked about the fact
exactly.
that this cannot continue, because we will destroy ourselves.
We will, and we are inherently dependent on a healthy environment. It's a kind of an oxymoron to cut down millions and millions of hectares of trees and then put wind farms up.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, okay. That as a mitigation for CO2. We
Hmm.
know that trees are the lungs of the earth. They they
Hmm.
suck in CO2. They emit oxygen. So there's a real disconnect, and of course that's driven by money and
Yeah.
greed, and uh, talking about wind farms and in particular wind factories. I like that to be.
Yeah. I
I
never
like
use the
to
word
use that
farm.
term. It's a factory. The amount
Absolutely.
of damage those towers do, it's not once they're up. I mean, yes, they do damage whilst they're up because of the noise, two, bird and bat strikes, three, when they start to degrade, they are full of toxins that then
Mm.
fall into the soil, get blown on the wind, end up in waterways. But so there's a wind factory that's been planned and had DA approval out near a big piece of land, 19,000 hectares of land. And it's approved this wind factory, and it is right in the middle of koala habitat, grey-headed flying foxes. I mean, the koala is endangered. The grey flying
Mm.
foxes are vulnerable. And when they had their environmental assessment done, it found that there was a significant national importance on that site because of
Mm.
the koalas. Yet those DAs still go through. Now, these wind towers are going to be 280 meters tall each. Now,
Yeah.
for a tower that tall, you need over 1,000 tons of cement per
In the
tower.
flames. Yeah.
Right. Cement, concrete, the production of is one of the
CO2.
biggest contributors to CO2 production. Then you've got to get it
Yeah.
all there.
Mm.
And where they're putting these towers, it cuts right through where these koalas have been, their territory has been sighted. Now, to me, that is an abuse of any protections that are put in place. We know the
Hmm.
protections that they might as well not
Hmm.
exist because the
Exactly.
exemptions are a
Yes.
100 times longer than the
Hmm.
protections are. So,
Hmm.
and money talks. Money
All I can say
talks.
is Tanya Plibersek, Chris Bowen, and co should be utterly, utterly ashamed of themselves. I've heard Tanya Plibersek stand there and say, "Once we've lost the rivers, they're gone forever." It's like, really? You mean like forests and animals that lived in that habitat that are a protected species, that's your job to do? And it's not
Yes.
about political, but it's like, that these people sold their soul somehow, because when you are not doing your job, which is the basics of the EPBC Act,
Yes. I
it's like
know.
that's what
I know, right?
it's we know these frameworks are here, but they're not used, and they're only used against farmers who want to put in, an extra paddock there, and they only want to extend it a couple of meters because they know that area, unfortunately, is not usable for anything else. So let's just
Yeah.
oh no, there's some rare orchid there, but we're not going to let you do that. Well, that's the
No,
excuse. And they said, well, I've never seen that orchid before, but I've heard this from so many times. But we can go through and destroy protected, as you said, historical sites that have been noted for their
yes,
biodiversity.
exactly. There is
Mm,
one rule for one set of people, and there are other rules for everybody else. And that's what we have to change.
mm. Okay, Claire's just dropped off for a minute. Hopefully, yep, she's back. Yep,
Okay.
you're back.
Um,
Yes.
we are back in the room. Okay, so this year, and I don't know if you're aware of this, I've been awarded the 2025 Australian of the Year local hero for Queensland for my work with wildlife. And that has given
Wonderful.
me an amazing platform um,
Mm,
to get doors opened. It
mm,
doesn't just allow me to speak to a wider audience. It allows me to have difficult and challenging conversations with people that are
yeah,
decision makers.
yeah,
And we have just had a change of government in Queensland.
that's
Now,
right.
this, from my perspective, the protection of our land, the deforestation of our land, this should never be anything that is controlled by politics. It
No.
should be a given that we
Mm,
care for our land, because once it's gone, it's gone. And we're putting ourselves in a very, very dangerous position if we carry on the way we are with
mm,
deforestation.
mm.
And so I have already had, like, I don't sit on my hands. I'm a doer. I'm an action taker.
Love it.
I'm not anybody that oh, it's great to have this award and all the rest of it. Now it's time to put this award to work. So I've already had a meeting, a private meeting with the new premier, and I've laid my cards on the table, and he's laid his cards on the table. And if we were a Venn diagram, funnily enough, you would see that there is a lot that of vision that we share, which
Mm,
is, for me, really encouraging. Yes, we need to see words put into action, but he has shared
Mm,
with me the communications that he's made with the Minister for the Environment and what his vision is for Queensland, and the crossover between my vision and what his vision is and how he has communicated that. There are big, big connections. So
mm.
whilst you know, politically the LNP haven't been known for doing great things in our environment, hey, the ALP at the moment have sold the environment down the Swanee. So
Yeah.
I'm open to talking to anybody that will listen and
Mm,
genuinely listen,
mm.
and will is prepared to have me as part of that journey as the local hero for Queensland, involved in that process. In January, I go down to Canberra and with the other 35 recipients to take part in the national Australia.
I think we'll have Claire come back on. I think it's network issues. So, she's
Okay.
back.
So I'm back. So in January, I go down to Canberra with the other 35 recipients from all states and territories for the Australia Day Awards. Now, if I was
Mm.
to win my category, that places even more power in our hands of those people in our amazing country who want to see change for the better, which means the
So,
end to why.
can I just ask then, the
Yes.
process of winning, is that through people voting for you, or is that through another process to do with those that are running the Australian of the Year?
um for no, it's you get nominated by somebody
Mm-hmm.
initially, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how I won
Mm-hmm.
mine. And you are judged by a panel of expert jurors. When you
Mm-hmm.
become a recipient, you are then obviously judged again by
Mm-hmm.
the national panel,
Mm-hmm.
and also after each round of the recipient awards for each state and territory, you are then filmed, and you by the ABC, and you film why, what is it that you do, what is it
Yeah.
that you can bring, what is it that you're passionate about, and then that is part of the judging process.
Well,
So
I wish you all the best with that video for the ABC, because everything that you are, I've seen that the ABC is talking about doesn't necessarily support this ideology at the moment. So I'm hoping there is a change of heart, because the ABC has not been kind to many people that have been pushing back against stopping this wind factory system
yes.
on land and in the ocean. They've been big promoters of that. So that's huge, huge interruption of habitat and deforestation. So all I can say is that from the people that I have heard from, Claire, this is why I was referred to interview you, because you are such a doer, because you practice not only what you preach, but you live and breathe it. So I could not be happy that someone like yourself is in this, and so people can really understand the processes you go through to get to this situation. So
Mm.
on that note, I hope you win, because you are more than deserving.
Thank you so much. It's but remembering that it is all about our environment and the wildlife. You know,
Absolutely.
the accolades are, you know, it's so wonderful to be acknowledged, and
It's the
I'm
platform.
really, oh, look, I am humbled beyond belief, because I
Mm,
never thought that, you know, I would I would receive such an honor. But at the end of the day, it is all about the wildlife and
mm,
the importance of our environment. There's an author, his name's Simon Musto, and he has written, I can't remember the title of the book, but it's all about how our survival as a species depends on how we care for our environment. and
Absolutely.
and it is vital, and people just don't realize, I think, the importance of our connection to land, um, and well, land and water and air and everything that makes up our environment, and that, if we continue the way we're going, um, yes, there'll be a handful of people that get incredibly rich out of building these wind factories, and by promoting this as a better way to produce electricity. Um,
All foreign corporations, not local. Yep, that's correct.
and if we people are getting sucked into that, because it's
Mm.
very easy to make people frightened. It's
Hmm.
very easy to make people
Yeah.
frightened. Um, Look what happened during COVID. People got
Hmm.
very, 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 very frightened.
Yes.
And whilst, that was a terrible thing that happened, we're now seeing what's coming out of that. We're seeing the injuries that have been caused to people through the vaccinations. And we've seen lots of negativity. And, the best way to control people is through fear.
And the lack of science. They're saying trust the science. There
The
was no
lack of
science. As soon as people were writing to the ministers for health, it's like, please, can you provide us the information about how this virus
Yeah.
was isolated in a laboratory? It couldn't be isolated, and it was said that there's no way that it can be a virus that's doing this if it can't be isolated. So people need to
Yeah.
understand what a virus is, and this is
Yeah.
why it's like, um, and a little bit of research, people have lost the skills of being critical thinkers, that they've believed
Correct.
mainstream media and the fear programming, that propaganda machine, which, has thrown the whole nation under the bus, because there's been no apology for those that did this to businesses, to
Mm,
families, what's happened. And it's the same ideology. It sits under the same umbrella what happened then, what's happening now, and the destruction of beautiful, pristine habitats, and the impact on these beautiful animals, which
mm,
I have vowed to fight for the whales. And whether people
yes.
believe the way that I'm doing it is correct or not, to be honest, when you understand what's going on, my background is marine science. So when you understand the
Mm,
even more fluid dynamics in the marine system as of on
yes.
land, that there is so little science done and research into the diversity of the species here.
Mm,
And what we're saying is like, well, if no one knows about it yet, let's not prove that it's there,
that's
because
right.
that will go against exactly. So let's pull all the funding away, which is what was happening over the last 20 years, is withdrawal of funding for all of this research. So it's been a systematic implementation of this whole overarching ideology that comes from
Yes,
nations that have nothing to do with us,
exactly. And
nothing
look
to
what
do with
they were.
Australia.
I mean, look what we were proposing here: seismic blasting. Hello,
Oh, it
in
makes
the
me feel
oceans.
sick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, if it's not enough to allow, Japan to whale, um, for and we know it's not for scientific purposes,
Yeah.
um, but add seismic blasting to that. Like,
Mm,
hello, when are we going to respect the planet we live on? Because that
yeah,
is what sustains us, and
absolutely.
if you keep chipping away, chipping away, chipping away,
Hmm.
at some point it's all going to crumble. There'll be nothing left, and we will fizzle. Oh, we'll be gone.
Yeah.
And
The
I,
thing,
I want. Hmm,
I think
sorry.
that we touched on the same subject just a minute ago, and about how, oh my gosh, I can't remember what it was. Um, I'll come back to it, but we talked about how, um, the fragmentation of population and habitat as well. And this is
Hmm,
where the lack of science here, when people understand that are locals that are seeing it, and it's not been listened to, that
Yeah.
you talk about, in one of your recent videos, talked about how male koalas need to
Mm.
have a very defined habitat. When you encroach on that, then there is a whole cascade of effect, and it's the same. So we know that it's the construction phase. It's the
Yes,
construction phase, not just the operational, that's going to cause the most destruction. So we have
that's
been
right.
saying this and banging this same drum. You and I are on the same page about this, because it's the seismic monitoring in the ocean, and then you've
Yeah,
got what's going to be absolutely catastrophic with taking out massive amounts of forest. Like, those blades are enormous. People
they
need to
are.
comprehend the amount of trees needed to be removed so they can get those blades on location is disgusting and disturbing.
Yes, it is. The amount of trees that are removed just to get them logistically in onto site. And now, the Great Dividing Range, which
Yeah.
is like
No,
the spine of Queensland. They want they've proposed to basically take the tops off the range to install 2,000 wind turbines. Like, who in their
it makes
right
me
mind
angry.
thinks that that is a good idea? Well, I know which government signed off on it, um, but
How
these
did this
things are not.
legislation even get here? This is what I don't understand. It's like, how did we come from such a balanced equation as far as where Australia was going in the trajectory, with all of this great um, platform and framework put in place, and yet nothing's done with it? It's not governed, it's not
Exactly.
implemented. It's just a joke, because there is no EPBC Act. It's a joke, because you may as well turn it into toilet paper at this point. Tanya Plavasek is
Yeah.
all I can say, is because when you can go out there and protecting the environment for the sake of this not green renewables ideology, and destroy massive amounts of habitat. When you take off the top of mountains, you totally remove the stability of that whole soil structure. I cannot comprehend how anyone can't get that through. This, like, it's the most basic thing. It's like, so taking the top off a mountain is going to destabilize everything. We're talking
Mm.
about erosion. We're talking about entire communities that live beneath that if there's excess rain. Like, they talk about like climate change and how they're, and regardless of what causes it, if we want to address it, let's look at it from real science base. If we're going to have
Yes.
an increase or a change in water and rainfall, then we look at flooding areas. Then, Queensland's right up there. We know that. So they have torrential downpour. What
Mm.
about the mass erosion? What about landslides? What about all of these things? That's not good either for the environment or for the sustainability of communities that should be able to grow and develop in a way that's integrated. And that's not
Agreed.
what's happening. Not what's
Agreed.
happening.
It's like somebody forgot to do a risk
Assessment.
assessment,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, threw
because
it up.
obviously they haven't done one. And also,
Nope.
culturally, that mountain range is very important. Cutting the tops off
Mm.
it, it's, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly it's culturally insensitive. It's wrong. The people that signed off on it should be charged with ecocide. I mean, they
Absolutely. And
should
I
be.
think if you change the ideology and the wording of this and put this out to these greenies that are
Mm.
not greenies at all, as far as I'm concerned, they've bought into an ideology and mind control manipulation, as far as I see it, is that if you said that a mining company was going to go in there and cut through the top of those mountains, they're like,
Yes.
mining? No way. But it's like, oh, well, it's okay to do that for this not green renewables. That's okay, because
Correct.
it's a box ticking event. This has been a
Correct.
box ticking event. There has been no consultation. There has been no feedback. There has been no way for the people that live in this area, those that really engender a protective spirit of making sure there's balance. Balance. What
Yes.
happened to balance? There's none.
Well, you know, if you haven't got balance, you know what happens, don't you? It
Yeah,
it all goes to shit very
yeah, it
quickly.
totally is down the
And we're
poor,
at
isn't
that
it?
tipping point. We're at that tipping point. And also, it's not just about Australia or Queensland. We have a responsibility to the rest of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I watched a really interesting uh, segment the other day, and it was the Prime Minister of Ghana. And he was being interviewed by a very pompous BBC interviewer who was trying to lecture this fellow on the fact that they'd put they were drilling oil off the coast, and that it would be, you know, it would create X amount of CO2. And the Prime Minister just said, hang on, wait, who are you to lecture me? He said, we have a forest, never mind the rest. We have a forest the size of your country that we are looking after, and we are net zero with our carbon emissions. And this fellow kept from the BBC kept trying to say, but yeah, but this oil that you want to put these platforms in and pump oil, and he kept coming back and saying, we look after our forests because our trees are doing the work that they're designed to do. And that is to
Yeah.
suck up the CO2 and pump out
Mm-hmm.
oxygen. So he said,
Yeah.
and we are at net zero.
And
So,
so my clap back, you're absolutely nailed it here, Claire, because I hear excuses coming from individuals in lots of different areas. So I've met with many stakeholders, politicians, and all kinds of organizations in the role that I've done. And I hear time and time again, oh, but we need to let farmers have some kind of like passive income, you know, if they really want. Well, my clap back to that is like, if you want to reduce CO2, put in a bunch of industrial hemp because that will remove stuff like that. Because industrial hemp, well, that
yes,
is very good for the environment. There's one good start. And two, how about we start regreening this planet, if that's what you're really concerned about, by planting trees, and instead of giving billions and hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign corporations that want to destroy our beautiful nation, we could put that money into, oh, wait a sec, greening this nation. But that would be a long term solution and actually good for us. And then we
yes,
could put the rest of the money that there's billions left in the back pocket into real sustainable practices and working towards baseload energy supplies that are actually have a very low ecological impact and footprint. How about that?
exactly.
Wow. Look at that. Solutions, you and I. Look at a couple of women just having a
I
chat
know,
here, Claire, and we can solve the problems of the world. How can't they
exactly.
have this conversation?
You know, you talk about industrial hemp. I worked out
Mm,
I was involved, and I worked for an environmental company back in 2010, 11, 12. And I worked out in the Western Downs on the CSG gas fields. And
mhm,
we were offering in environmental solutions to things like production waste, etc. But I started a project in 3 schools out in the Downs. Western Downs is noted for its beef cattle and cotton, and
mhm.
that's what it grows. Now,
Mhm,
we started looking at bamboo as a cash crop, as
mhm.
mosso bamboo, which is not a creepy one that creeps.
It's
A
clustered.
bamboo, a bamboo plant will last for 70 years. You can harvest it after the first 3 or 4 years. Um, and it is one of the greatest sequesters of CO2. We
Mhm,
proved, and we had the with their ag science departments. So I was working in 3 schools with their ag science departments. We actually had the curriculum changed by the Queensland Education to include a component around the production of bamboo. So I was
mhm,
teaching them propagation and all the rest of it. And we proved that bamboo could replace the traditional cotton, and that
mhm,
at the farm gate, farmers are getting around about 1 to 1.75 tons of cotton off a hectare. And we proved that you, you could harvest up to 30 tons of
Hmm.
bamboo for to turn into cotton
Yeah.
at the farm gate.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
economically, and as far as the potential for growth, economic growth,
Hmm.
bamboo won hands down. Also, you don't need pesticides or insecticides, and as we know,
Correct.
um, the production of cotton
Cotton
actually
does.
takes 25% of the world's pesticides and insecticides are used on cotton production, and that's why a lot of farmers who farm cotton and workers end up with dreadful cancers because of the
That's right.
carcinogens.
Mm.
Bamboo doesn't need it. It provides its own mulch. It doesn't need anywhere near as much water, and nothing eats it. Nothing wants to eat
No.
it or kill it. Nothing
No.
likes it. It just
Yep.
grows. So we did all that research, and we proved what could be done. The
Wow.
answers are there. The
Mm.
answers are there.
That's right.
And why that never got taken up, I don't know. Because
Cha-ching, because who's invested? What
yeah,
deals have been done in the back doors, because this is how it works, that people think that the people that they've elected as their representatives are the people that are there writing the legislation behind the back doors, and that they're the ones
yes,
that are going to be being good representatives of the people, when in fact the people behind the back doors are writing legislation that only represents corporations for their money, and who's invested
yes,
behind the doors that are supporting political groups. I think we've
yeah,
well and truly seen that above board. I think that's the one thing over the last 4 or 5 years that I am really, really grateful, that so many people have become aware of just how corrupt the whole political system is, how
mm,
corrupt it's become, to the point where they are nothing but proponents for corporations. They allowed corporations to not even pay tax in this nation, and yet the rest of us are
yeah,
pushed to the wall. Organizations like yourselves have to probably apply for funding or do your own fundraising. I mean, you've got to be joking. You're doing the job that the government should be doing, but instead of stopping it in the first place, which they have all the legislation, the
yes,
acts, and the framework in place, they're not doing their job. So it's
mm,
like accountability to the absolute nth degree. So you and I are on the same
yes.
page about that, and we will be out there banging that same drum, my dear friend.
Every day of the week, every day of the week, until, we either need a people revolution for people to
Yeah,
stand up and say, actually, we've had enough,
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 enough.
and
Yep,
or we need a complete switch around in government approach to what is really important long term. You know,
yes.
things like economic growth and sustainability and strength of the economy. Yes, of course, but not at the cost
No,
of our very well being,
yeah. Our own
because it
existence
is
is what it's going to
our
be.
own
Yeah, you're right.
existence. And selling out to, I know that Albanese very recently just did another deal with China um, to do with beef farming. The
Mm,
whole time we allow other nations to buy
yeah,
up huge tracts of land, particularly in Queensland, and control
yeah. And
it.
same in WA. Both, we have
Yeah.
that in common.
We lose control of our environment. And although, in saying, in WA, there are two wonderful people who are also recipients of the Australian of the Year awards. I can't remember their names. They are farmers, they're a couple,
Hmm.
and their farm was, when they acquired the farm, it was classed as brittle soil. These
Wow.
guys they
Oh,
implement regenerative farming techniques.
agriculture. Yeah, I know who
Yes.
you're talking
And
about. Yes.
they have brought that land back to life, and they have made it into a cornucopia of great food, because They worked with nature instead of against nature. They let nature teach them what it needed to be our food basket. And,
Wow.
you know, the more we can support people like that, that are looking at long term sustainable farming methods, the better.
Yeah.
You know, and we should really be giving our support to people like that, that are pioneering a very, very old farming method.
Yeah, practices. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
You nailed it. The words sustainability and biodiversity have exited our vocabulary, our policies, and how we do impact assessment, which is why we are in the trouble we are.
yeah.
Claire, I feel like we are soul sisters. We're going to be in this to the end. Anytime you need a platform, you call me on anything, or anyone else that wants to have a voice about this.
Beautiful.
I am at your disposal. Thank you so much. I have loved every moment of this interview, and I look forward to more.
Thank you so much, Martine. And, you know, thank you for that wonderful offer. Let's keep on banging the drum to the beat of our rhythm and get everybody
Yes,
else beating the same rhythm too.
absolutely. You bet. Take care, and thank you so much, Claire.
You're welcome. Bye bye for now.
All the best. Bye.
Bye.